Hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Ryan in Singapore. Welcome to our mindfulness practice. Today's topic is mindfulness, is secular mindfulness nothing more than covert Buddhism? And I think it's an interesting topic. It's one that I haven't addressed directly, and I think it's one that should be addressed. Um, I've done a few sessions where I've I've talked about a few of the things that I've discovered on Mindful Leader. Mindful Leader's written some articles just about making sure that we're not falling victim to confirmation bias in the mindfulness community. That we're not a bunch of mindfulness practitioners doing mindfulness research and mindfulness studies and going, well, I hope the answer is that mindfulness has some really strong effect, right? Because then we end up with biased research where it should be, I guess that's kind of what's unfortunate, is that those who want to do mindfulness research are those who are interested in mindfulness and tend to be mindfulness practitioners. So, you know, what would be helpful is when those skeptics want to also show something and do this kind of research as well. So, what's it like? What's happening? And I think that's what I've appreciated Mindful Leader for. And especially like as I read the comments on some of those articles, can see that there is some backlash against them from the community, from the mindfulness community, for wanting to discover the truth, right? And I thought that's crazy. Like, why would you be against some open exploration, right? And that is, and by the way, that this is speaking of Buddhism, that's a Buddhist principle. It's don't take everything at face value. Come and see for yourself. There's a Pali word that literally means that's in the Buddhist teachings. Come and see for yourself. So where is this line between Buddhism and mindfulness practice? So mindfulness practice, yeah, and Cece says, I feel confused how mindfulness is not Buddhist, right? And that's what's interesting, and that's why this topic is important. I think is an important one to discuss, because I don't think that mindfulness should be it should not be an evangelical tool to go, here are some secular techniques. Look at these secular techniques that are going to help you out, and now that you're practicing them, oh, surprise, surprise, you're a Buddhist now, right? I really think that's not a cool way to do things, and it shouldn't be how we're presenting this topic and these materials to people in a way to secretly convert them to Buddhism. And I mean, unfortunately, in my time of talking with other MBSR teachers, I have discovered teachers who feel the curriculum is very flexible, when in fact, from everything that I can see about it, it's not. It's not a way to preach any specific agenda other than what is explicitly written in the course materials. Okay? So, is mindfulness Buddhist? The first thing, the first kind of piece to discuss about this is that even though, so what's called secular mindfulness, that is widely practiced in apps, schools, therapy offices, and workplaces, does come from, originally come from Buddhist practices, right? And I think that this is one of the issues that people may have, because I know I've certainly seen articles about it in the States. People go, well, this violates separation of church and state. And so this is the real question, right? So does it does practicing these techniques, is it possible to strip away the religious part and to only have the part that is considered an exercise, right? So yes, focused attention practice. I mean, let's talk about that, right? Focused attention practice is or mindfulness of breathing, especially when it's mindfulness of breathing. It comes directly from Buddhism. There is a sutta called the Satipatthana Sutta, which Satipatthana is Pali, is a Pali word that means mindful. Literally, Sati means mindfulness. Mindfulness of breathing. In fact, anapanasati is the Pali word. Ana means breathing in, pana means breathing out, and sati means mindfulness, right? So anapanasati is the technique of mindfulness of breathing. And so, what is this designed to do? Is designed to, in Buddhism, is designed to, one, generate mindfulness. Mindfulness, this concept of being aware of what's happening in any given moment. This skill of mindfulness that that I talk about pretty much every time I'm here is applicable in everyday life and can be used as an exercise. And, exercise can be secular, and most of the time the exercise that we do is. But if you maybe consider yoga is something that is a physical activity but has religious roots, right? So does yoga then become something religious because of its religious roots, right? And I think this is kind of the interesting question to ask. And I've heard someone use the analogy of like, well, is physics Christian because Isaac Newton was a Christian? And it's kind of a good analogy, but kind of not, in that physics doesn't have any direct link to Christianity, right? Whereas mindfulness of breathing is directly, right? I mean, there's nothing about worshiping Christ in physics, right? Whereas there is explicitly this Buddhist practice that is inside of mindfulness. And so you find that, okay, just like yoga, there is a benefit to doing a mindfulness practice without having the religious baggage attached to it. So it's like, can we bring something useful out of an ancient tradition and apply it here in Eastern, let's as well say that, an ancient Eastern tradition that may be foreign to a lot of us in the Western world, and bring it into the Western world and get something out of it. And I can definitely say, as a person who lives in Asia, who has Buddhist in-laws, right, that Western Buddhism and Asian Buddhism are very different things, right? So, the way that we take it and interpret it in the West does change it a lot, because just like any religion, let's say, right? I mean, I look at Filipino Christianity versus American Christianity. These two things have a lot of differences. So when we transport something across cultures, some of our own cultural baggage ends up landing on it. So okay, I want to have a look at the chat before I keep rattling on. So why aren't mindfulness classes covered by Medicare? That's a good topic. Maybe we can talk about that next time. There is some dogma with Buddhist belief that I don't align with, says Micah, although much less than with most religions that I know about. But there are some positive ideals and practices I see no harm in using for the positive impact in life and people around me who benefit from me being a less reactive person, right? And so this is the question, right? Can we not throw out the baby with the bathwater as we examine this? this kind of union of what are the mindfulness practices. And this is another interesting topic when you talk about dogma. One of the very first thing that pops into my mind when I see the word dogma and Buddhism together is I just think about Thailand, and that I've done 2 of my meditation retreats in Thailand with the Thai forest, in the Thai forest tradition, which is a Buddhist tradition. And I think the Thai forest tradition, which started rolling in the late 1800s, the idea was to re-look at things with fresh eyes, with beginner's mind, because of the dogma that had crept in to Thai Buddhism. And even now, the Thai forest tradition is a minority in Thailand. You can see that there is so much dogma that is still existing in most of Thai Buddhism, and things that seem out of place to me in Buddhism, right? When it comes to like things like prayer and worship, that was this part of the original Buddhist canon or not? So but we're getting into the meditation here soon. I just kind of wanted to say a couple different things. So it should be an adaptation of something spiritual into something secular. It should not be a disguise. And I think this is the main thing that kind of motivated me to talk about this today, was because I think in the past I've tiptoed around some of the Buddhist roots, because I'm just conscious and want to be as secular about this as possible. I don't consider myself a Buddhist. I think that this practice can be done. There are tons of benefits. When I first started practicing mindfulness, I saw the benefits, and there was no belief around it. It was simply an exercise to help increase awareness. However, it is important to say it clearly, to say that this practice has a root in Buddhism. And I think that that's important to say, because otherwise, if we aren't being transparent about it, then doesn't it become sneaky and covert in a way to like, hey, surprise, now you've been doing something Buddhist, and like people, and then you go, well, what does that mean? Is this possible? Is it possible to do a Buddhist practice and not have any negative impact on the religion that you do practice? Or if you're atheist, what does that mean as well? So what's left in and what's left out? So I think that's an important question to ask as well. What do we gain by making mindfulness more accessible? And I think that is the research is clear, and I think there's anecdotal evidence here in this chat that people here have had. I mean, you're here. You've been coming and meditating with me for 4 years. Some of you. For what reason, right? I mean, it's not by accident. It's because you have seen some positive benefit in your mental health, that you've been able to see that. I think, as I've said many times, that this mindfulness is one of the foundational kinds of practices that we can do to build self-awareness, so that we have more capacity to use things like cognitive behavioral therapy. We have more self-awareness to be able to use these tools that we are introduced to by our therapists and in other realms. Are there dangers to practicing mindfulness? One of the dangers is that it does bring it sometimes brings us out of denial. and that can be scary for someone who's not ready for it. And I think that's something also that we shouldn't be overstating the benefits and minimizing what are the risks. And I think when I introduce mindfulness-based stress reduction, when I have that very first introductory course, I always make sure to remind people that there is that danger of getting to know yourself more. And you might go, well, why is that a danger? Because sometimes practicing, if you've never practiced before, lets that genie out of the box, or lets the genie out of the lamp, and it's hard to get it back in when we discover these things, when we discover something difficult about ourselves. When you practice, so here's the reflection question I'd like to kind of leave you with as we go into our practice today. So and I'll paste it in the chat because I think it's relevant enough. When you practice mindfulness, does it feel like a spiritual act? Does it feel like a stress relief technique? Does it feel like a moment of presence? And can it be all of those things? Or does it shift depending on your approach? So, is this, am I designing this to be intentionally cryptic? No, I'm not. But what I am trying to do is to bring some kind of awareness to what it is that we're doing, and to have you have a healthy questioning, like, what is it that we're doing? Micah says, unless a person knows, understands, believes the Buddhist dogma behind the practice, I don't feel like the practice itself is inherently adjoined with the religious group that it comes from. And it's not a spiritual act for me personally. Thanks, Micah. One of the questions I always ask myself as I lead meditation practice is, would my mother be comfortable doing this practice with me? Right? My mother is considers herself to be a strong Christian, and when I lead practice, I always kind of imagine my mother in the back of the room, and I go, would my mother be comfortable here now? Is this practice in alignment? Is it soluble? Is it missable? Right? Do these two things mix? Can mindfulness and Christianity mix without my mother violating her own beliefs? And so I believe the answer is yes. Let's get into our practice. So sit comfortably. Find a posture that's going to be conducive to focusing your attention on your breath. So sitting up straight and tall. And see if you can intentionally elongate your breath a little bit. Take a few deeper breaths as we get started today. As you're breathing, can you really feel that expansion and contraction? So maybe continuing to breathe a few deeper breaths. If you like, you can place a hand on your belly. feeling that expansion and contraction as we breathe. And now, see if you can let go of that control and let the inherent wisdom of your body take over. And you're just along for the ride. You're observing, feeling the breath as it comes in, as it goes out. Using this breath as the mental training ground to see if you can hold your attention at the breath. So this being the objective, the object of the meditation. Feeling these physical sensations of breathing. And you'll notice from time to time your mind starts to wander. You start thinking about something else. See if you can acknowledge, accept, this is where the mind went. The mind escaped my control and went away from the breath. Can I intentionally let go of that thought, that distraction, and non-judgmentally return my attention to the feeling of breathing? Is the mind still here, or has it wandered away? Just remember, you can always come back. And now is not the time to think about the questions. Now is the time to train in the mindfulness gym. Holding attention at the breath as best we can. And when the mind wanders away, acknowledging that it has happened, gently letting go, intentionally bringing the mind back to the object of the meditation, and doing so with compassion and care and acceptance, knowing that this has already happened. We're not trying to go anywhere. We're not trying to achieve something. Whatever happens in our practice happens from this gentle repetition. And we don't need to try to make it happen. As long as we can acknowledge that moment that the mind has wandered away and gently bring the mind back. Just this. Nothing more. Breathing in, breathing out. Being here, being alive. as we gently bring our mind back from distraction. There's that subtle self-compassion, that ability to see that it's possible for me to be easy on myself. That I don't have to get angry at myself when I find myself not engaged with the task I have set my mind to. And this subtle self-compassion is the foundation for the compassion that we can have for everyone in the world in this interconnected web of humanity. So remember that every single time you bring your attention back. It's a slow, minute way to cultivate compassion for humanity. And so now we'll slowly draw our practice to its close, and I'll close practice with 3 rings of the bell. Thanks for practicing with me. Thanks for being here today. It's hilarious, Rachel, that you brought it up, because I was just about to bring up the exact same thing. So before I get into that, just like, if anything else is coming up for you when you practice mindfulness, does it feel like a spiritual act, a stress relief technique, a moment of presence? Can it be all of those things, or does the meaning shift on how you approach it? Angela says, definitely stress relieving, but being non-religious, it does bring some uplifting aspects to me more than just my mood. I do refer to it as my spirit, but not in a religious way. Anyone else? Those two sentences or 3 sentences, they bring up anything for you? Please share in the chat if there's anything coming up. And Rachel, to answer your question, I just want to tell a little story, was that as a Search Inside Yourself teacher, and I'm a certified Search Inside Yourself teacher. That was it was Google's in-house mindfulness program. And as a certified, when I got my certification, they gave me a little bell, not this one, but another singing bowl with a little wooden striking mechanism, and that was it. And as we would teach Search Inside Yourself, we would end meditations with 3 rings of the bell. And that was kind of interesting. And what makes it particularly interesting was when I was teaching Search Inside Yourself to the Hong Kong police force. Because then I got the bell out at the end of the meditation. I rang the bell and people started chuckling. And then I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, for them, this is totally a religious thing, right? Like, and then from that point on, I quit. I'm like, nope, no bell for this, because this needs to stay in this realm of secular. And I just thought that's just so interesting to be teaching in a place where everyone comes from. I'd say that's probably the predominant religion in Hong Kong. I mean, you see a lot of Buddhist temples all over the place. And so just kind of realizing, although meditation, I have to say meditation doesn't feel like it's a big part of, strangely, isn't a big part of Chinese Buddhism, So, I mean, that's how I kind of get back to dogma, is just seeing kind of how far away the Buddhism in China and Thailand has strayed away from the original suttas and religious and roots, and like you know, roots of what that practice was about. And I mean, obviously Buddhism isn't alone in that. Like many religions are straying away and have strayed away from what their core values were about, and it becomes, sometimes it becomes about a political movement, right? Like this religion is tied with this political movement, and I'd say that is probably one of the reasons why it could be seen as religious or a threat to have mindfulness in these secular settings like schools and workplaces, because I know for a fact there are a group of people, at least in America, that try to use mindfulness as tying it into their political system. And so the other side starts to feel threatened when that happens, and rightfully so. And I think that's one of the things that, enrage is a strong word, but I almost want to say enrages me, is when people have taken mindfulness and used it as a political tool, because this is a practice that should be accessible to everyone, that can reduce, right? And this sounds Buddhist. It can reduce the suffering of everyone. But that's the fact, right? And so is sending well wishes, isn't that Buddhist? Is self-compassion Buddhist, right? These are good questions. It is on, I saw it on the, I was recently at a Thai forest monastery here in Singapore, and I saw the Pali word for compassion on the side, on one of the statues, and I'm like, right, this compassion does have some tie to Buddhism to it, but does that mean the Buddhists have the corner on compassion? Can no one else be compassionate because Buddhism is compassionate? Is sending well wishes, is that something that is religious, right? And that's the thing. What am I sending when I send well wishes? I'm not like, I'm not making any magic, right? I don't have a magic wand around here. I'm not, there's not a rainbow that comes out of my heart when I send compassion, right? The sending of compassion to me is about attitude cultivation. It's just about inclining my mind to a particular way of thinking, so that when I see, and I think actually this is a question that Rachel and I were just chatting about on messages, right? Is like, what's the point of doing these compassion practices and well wishes for everybody, even if they're a bunch of evil jerks? It's not about I'm sending something. I'm that evil jerk, or maybe unfortunately isn't actually physically receiving the compassion that I'm sending out. What I'm doing is I'm inclining my mind to compassion to remind myself that down deep, this person shares the same humanity that I have. So, is that Buddhist? So I've got a great little story that I want to share before we go, and a couple closing thoughts. So talk about a cliffhanger. Open up a subject that leaves us with hundreds of thoughts and questions, and then bye, I'm off on holiday. See you when you get back. You know what? This is something that's a great point. I think it's I love this topic. I think it's a great topic to explore further, and I don't want to leave a cliffhanger. So please, everybody, there is a chat group called Ryan's Daily Mindfulness Circle. And that's my my invitation for you. If you want to see me back during my holiday, I will come back, but I'd like to really have a good reason Besides, I mean, hey, look, daily practice is a great reason, okay? But, if you want to explore this topic further, let you write in that group. Open Insight Timer groups. Write that down. Write the name of that group down. And let's start a conversation about this in the group. And if there's enough traction about it, I'm very happy to engage more with this topic. So, closing idea, right? Rather than worry if secular mindfulness is covert Buddhism, maybe the deeper question is, how can we practice in a way that's wise, compassionate, and honest, whether we call it Buddhism or not? In the end, what matters isn't the label. What matters is how we show up, with awareness and with care. And so one more little piece here. So if you know Thich Nhat Hanh also wrote a book called Living Buddha, Living Christ. So this was kind of one of his inspirations was his meetings with Dr. Martin Luther King. And I think that's interesting to see that there is, a possibility for these two things to coexist. So here's a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. So mindfulness is not an evasion or escape. It means being here, being present, and totally alive. It is true that it's a Buddhist practice, but it's also something that anyone can do. So, again, I'd love to keep talking about this. I've got here. You can if you haven't followed me on Insight Timer, please do. You should be able to find, if nothing else, you can find my circle, my group through there. So I'd love to keep talking about it. I hope you've enjoyed today's session. I hope that it's been a bit insightful and useful for you to understand yourself and understand how this practice has come about, what effect it's had on you, and what effect it has on the world around you as well. And, I think the most important thing is that we stay true to the roots we stay true to the intentions of this practice. Thanks, Jean, for your donation. I appreciate that so much. All right, let's close practice with this cultivation of attitude towards self and others. Repeat after me if you like. May I be happy and peaceful. May everyone watching, listening, wherever you are, I wish you all happiness and peace. And may all sentient life here on planet Earth, all of humanity, I wish us all happiness and peace. Thanks, Rachel, for your donation. I have just finished recording my first course on the 9 attitudes of mindfulness-based stress reduction. I've got a little bit of editing to do, a little bit more work to do on it. So part of when I'm in the States, I'm going to wrap that up and I'm going to send it out. And I hope you'll take a look at it and take that course. I've put a lot of effort into it and it seems like it's awesome. It seems great so far. So when that comes out, I'll probably, hey, who knows? Maybe I'll do a live event to help promote that. So engage in Ryan's Daily Mindfulness Circle. Tell me about what you want to hear about, and I'll see you next time. Until then, bye-bye.